I was on Colin Cowherd's show, Friday appearance on the Cowherd Show, on the Herd, show that precedes this, Fox Sports 1, Fox Sports Radio. And Colin said, hey, systems don't work. Basically, players work, systems don't. And the downfall of the Patriots is their reliance on a system. I'm paraphrasing now, right? He pointed to the fact that the Spurs are no longer competitive at the top of the NBA, and the Spurs being a system-oriented franchise. I don't think he has it a little bit wrong. This is where Colin was right, where Colin was wrong. This is when Colin was wrong. And I love him. He's a dear friend. I don't say everything that ends up playing out and being accurate. But are you freaking kidding me with what we've seen from the Patriots this year? Keep in mind, the Patriots not only lost 8 players to opt out, including a couple of their best defensive players, Patrick Chung, Dante Hightower. Stephon Gilmore, the defensive player of the year in the NFL, has been hurt most of the year. Julian Edelman's been out most of the year. He's their best wide receiver, most proven wide receiver. And Cam Newton struggles to actually throw a football. I'm not talking about into tight windows and reading coverage. I'm not discussing whether or not he goes through his progressions and he's less accurate with each progression. I'm telling you, this guy struggles to throw a football. And they're 6-7. A league where they're everybody's biggest game, a league where they've kicked everybody's ass for 18, 19 years, where there aren't many coaches or organizations that think kindly to the way in which they've done business. They may respect it, but they don't like it. And they're still 6-7 on the season. That's pretty insane, isn't it? And here's the cutoff. I don't think the Patriots have a system, because if you go back and look, when Tom Brady first got there, it was very controlled, very conservative, used the running backs a ton. Remember, they brought Corey Dillon over. He was well-traveled from the Bengals, and he became a star. They would find a running back, one that could catch and run out of the backfield, and hide Tom Brady until Tom Brady ended up becoming a star. The peak of Tom Brady threw 50 touchdown passes. He had Randy Moss. That team threw the ball deep down the field. They also then had Aaron Hernandez and Rob Gronkowski at the same time. They were the first to break out 2 tremendous pass-catching tight ends. You guys remember that? Then they went to almost like a spread game, quick game, a lot of stuff underneath. Right? Started with Rashae Caldwell and Troy Brown, then metamorphosized itself into Wes Welker. Wes Welker led the league in catches 3 straight years with the Patriots. And then, of course, they went to Amendola and ultimately to Edelman. There is no one system. In fact, the Spurs have gone through a double post system, but double post team when they had David Robinson and Tim Duncan. Then when Tim Duncan was the best player in the league, they moved Tim Duncan to center and played around him. Then they were kind of the first to use a lot of ball movement, almost European-style hoop, when you had Manu at his peak and Tony Parker at his peak. There is no one style that the Spurs used. But the Spurs had a philosophy. Like Chip Kelly has a system. Chip Kelly's system is all-encompassing. He talks about sleep. He talks about diet. But on the football field, it's about tempo. He believes that his players are better trained, better conditioned, better fed than the opponent. And if they play faster, ultimately that training ends up playing out. It worked in college at Oregon with the help of Willie Lyle's recruiting pamphlet. It worked for 2 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles. And then, obviously, when they did not have as good a personnel and people started to figure out that system, it didn't work in Philly. It didn't work in San Francisco. And it's yet to really hit with UCLA. That's a system. The philosophy of the Patriots has been to not pay top dollar for free agents, to not pay top dollar for your players, although pay them and pay them well, and build up a depth of talent. And then a year before you think they're going to command too much money or they're over the hill, then you jettison them and you move on. It, by the way, is a similar philosophy to what the Steelers have always used with their defense. And by the way, it's not that dissimilar to what the Spurs have done. Right? The one time the Spurs stepped out of self and signed a big free agent contract, it was LaMarcus Aldridge. And they've never been the same since because they got away from who they were. Draft well, develop well. I mean, Manu Ginobili is the second to last pick of the NBA draft. He was a young EuroLeague star. They let him develop some in Italy. Then they brought him over, and he became arguably the best, most impactful European player, or not European, foreign, please from Argentina, foreign player that we've ever had. Tony Parker was drafted very young, out of Paris, played professionally. They developed him. Tim Duncan, obviously, number 1 overall pick. And they got him because they were in the lottery. And they lucked out. The Celtics had 2 picks, and they developed around him. But look, the Spurs have a philosophy. The Patriots have a philosophy. Every game you try and win, that game. You're not so tied to your philosophy. You're not one of these coaches, well, when we do well. We go win. Like, no, the Patriots, when the other team can't stop the run and they have the right personnel, they run it. When the other team loads up against running, they throw it. That's how they like to play. Were they a 3-4 team or a 4-3 team in championship years? You know what the answer is? Yes. You know why? Because they would do whatever was the weak. They would operate under whatever the weakness is of the team we're facing. That's the style we're going to play. Right? Here's what Bill Belichick is this season. We've been doing these promos for Discovery Plus, which is a new streaming service coming in 2021. Does that count? Does that count as one of the litany of reads? It should, because this is really good. Do you guys watch the show Chopped on Food Network? I love that show. And the thing I love most about that show is it's basically like if you don't go to the store tonight, you don't pick up, and you have like a steak, and then you got peanut butter, and you got noodles, wontons, soy sauce, and they're like, go ahead. We need an appetizer, we need an entree, we need a dessert, and you can only use what's in this basket. Now, figure it out, right? Like, isn't that the coolest thing? And these people are amazing. Now, they'll add ingredients or whatever. And look, if you put, like, I have a 14-year-old daughter who wants to be a chef, and she's pretty much figured out that if you put garlic, salt, and if you saute onions, I mean, it's all pretty much magnificent, right? Like, you saute onions and the house just, oh my God. But it's an amazing show to watch because you have these really, really talented minds that have to figure it out and make something edible at it when normally those aren't the ingredients that you include. That's what Bill Belichick is currently doing this season. I mean, look, he's got a quarterback who can't throw, has only played one place, didn't have an offseason, and can't throw. Like, can't throw a football. He's had 3 games of less than 100 yards passing. Let me repeat that. Cam Newton has had 3 games of less than 100 yards passing, 8 games of less than 200 yards passing. And they're 6-7. They're so well coached that Anthony Lynn essentially got fired. He hadn't been fired technically yet, but Anthony Lynn got fired last week without knowing it or without admitting it, losing 45-0 at home to that exact same Patriots team you saw get disemboweled on national TV by the LA Rams. And the Rams are better than the Chargers. They're not that much. They're not 60, 70 points better than the Chargers. They're just not. It's because coaching does matter. And Bill Belichick's philosophy has allowed him to be successful. Now, you're still going to need talent. No one's ever done it without talent, with quarterbacks that can't throw, wide receivers that can't get open, backups on defense. This is a bridge year to building something different when their salary cap changes dramatically next season. But Belichick's not a system guy. He's a philosophy guy. Popovich's not a system guy. He's a philosophy guy. Systems work until they don't. Philosophies, well, the right ones last forever.